Ladies and gentlemen, it does give me great pleasure to introduce our main keynote speaker today. From the UK, if you haven't heard him speak before, you haven't seen some of the stuff that's out there on the World Wide Web, you're about to have a new experience, ladies and gentlemen. This man has solved problems for some of the biggest business organizations in the world. He's done it for a long time, he's doing it now, and he's going to continue to do it for a long time in the future. Great thinkers think outside the box. And this is a quote from somebody that's worked with Jonathan. Ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to be thinking outside the box. This young man is going to take you right outside the warehouse to quote. Please welcome for the Rosling Awards main keynote speaker from the UK, Jonathan MacDonald. Thank you, sir.
Music. I love it. Nothing like a bit of live music. I remember my time in the music industry when I was the chairman of the British music industry in 2000, 1999 and 2000. We were sitting in the room listening to this story from this young thought leader guy called Giles, with spiky hair and bad teeth. And he came into the office and he sat down with us and he said, Napster, mp3.com and Kazaa. And I thought he was speaking a different language. So it was like, what is this? He said, well, the whole thing about music now is that people are actually going to share files with each other. And they won't need physical music. And this is pretty much the response that we had. It was like showing a Concorde jet to a medieval knight on horseback. So I said, okay, we look after the third highest amount of gross domestic product for the country as the music industry. And what you're telling me is that people are going to send files to each other. How are they going to pay us? And this guy said, well, they're not going to pay you. Now, to put it in context, we were expensing Porsches. When we were partying in Cannes on a yacht, if we liked the yacht, we'd buy the yacht and then give it back afterwards without a refund. So when someone comes in and says, people are going to share files with each other and you're not going to get paid, I want you to imagine in your life when the last time you felt as if someone had reached inside you and ripped out your organs. Just think about that feeling. Where everything you know is totally wrong. So, we thought about it a bit. We hired in some really expensive consultants. And we challenged them with a question. We said, hey, you're the top consultant in the world about this whole digital thing. Tell us how we can make money out of people sending music to each other. And we spent £2 million on one consultant, we spent £600,000 on another, and £800,000 on another. And the outcome from all the consultants was, you can't. So we fired the consultants and got another range of consultants in. And we said, the answer has to be you can. Okay, now go. And the consultant said, well, we can't change the way that it is. I mean, yeah, sure, the music industry might change and maybe there'll be ways to monetize the digital content, but the music industry that you know from up until today has now ended. And so we fired that consultant and this went on, and then eventually we had this great idea. Because we heard every single consultant told us one thing in their slide deck, and they kept on mentioning this word, internet. So we were like, right. We have our enemy. So I, as the chairman, I decided that I would find and take to court the chief exec of the internet. Oh yes. Yeah. Oh yes. So I hired the most expensive lawyers in Europe to find out the chief exec of the internet. And after about a week, they came back and said, John, listen, the thing is, the internet isn't actually a thing. I was like, well, it is a thing. I've seen it on all these slide presentations. So you can't tell them, you're supposed to be the most expensive lawyers in Europe. And they're like, yep, that's just cost you another 20,000 euros. I'm like, what? So then they said, right, okay, here's the thing. The internet isn't a company, it's not owned by anyone, and anyone can use it however they want. And if you get money for something, it's down to you doing something in the value chain that people want to pay for. However, if you don't do anything in the value chain that people want to pay for, you won't get any money. That's it. Save your money. But, so we fired those lawyers. We got some new lawyers. And we said, listen, the end of this conversation is, you give me a name and address of the chief exec of the internet. That's the end of this conversation, like 15 minutes time. Okay, now go. And they were like, there's all this shuffling of papers, and then eventually someone comes in with a name and address of a guy in France. So, I got him. So, we constructed a 168-page fax. Do you remember fax? 168-page fax, and sent it to him. That will show you. Come along with your internet. It's like we're the music industry, sunshine. We've been going around for hundreds of years. And then eventually we found out, many months later, after we had no response from this fax, and we sent lawyers over to the address and everything, the address that one of the lawyers had given us was actually the chief exec of an advertising agency in France, who I then met later on in life, and he actually has the 168-page fax framed on his wall of his office. With a title over the top saying, "The day that I was sued for running the internet." Ha ha ha. Great, so yeah, this is nothing to do with my presentation, it's just music kind of stirs these problems inside me, I don't know what it is. But you know, what we were doing basically then was we had a linear approach. We thought that the past dictated the future, right? So we're making all this money, we're expensing Porsches, travelling on yachts, drinking champagne, that's it, and then the future is going to look pretty much the same. Slightly better shop, champagne, slightly bigger yachts, slightly different colour Porsches, all good. So we've got a linear strategy. What we didn't know was that change is exponential. So we have this problem. And it's like this. So we thought that everything was going to be this diagonal. So from the past over here to the future over there, everything's going to be pretty much flat-ish diagonal. And then this exponential change meant that if you spin forward 48 months from the conversation that I started with, we had lost 83% of our profit in the music industry. That's what it feels like. God damn it. I still want to find the chief exec of the internet, and I will still sue him. But I'm over it, I'm fine. Mum, I'm fine, I swear. So, this is where the disruption risk happens between our linear strategy and the exponential change, and it really hurts, that bit in the middle. And it's weird because people actually invite me to come on stage and they go, "John, I want to talk about the future." Talk about future. Right. What bit? Right, just the future. Okay, future of IT in Norway. Okay. Well, okay, here's the future thinking. I have no idea. So many people scrambling for a refund. The last keynote speaker, useless. Preferred the Hillbilly Rockets. Said no one ever. No, I'm kidding. But it's interesting. It's interesting. Because the reality is, the only thing I can predict is that change happens. And today's the slowest pace of change we'll ever experience. Today's the slowest pace of change we'll ever experience. It gets faster tomorrow, and it gets faster the day after that. We don't know what's going to happen, and what we tend to do is we tend to think of what happened in the past and think that that might be a bit like that in the future with a bit of new functionality and stuff. And the reality is we don't like change. We don't like change. We like change when we're thinking about what new shoes to buy or what new holiday to book, but we don't like change when it happens a fundamental part of our business. It's the last thing we want to do. No one really likes change. Change is the enemy of the people that are competent. If If you're competent at doing something, the last thing you want to do is someone comes on and changes it. Then someone says to me, just before I come on stage, hey John, listen, you need to speak in Norwegian. Just before I come on stage? I'd be like, no way. Everyone speaks English in here. Like, no, sorry John, actually everyone speaks Norwegian. What do? What you tend to do is we tend to react. We react to change. I reacted in the music industry, we react to change. We don't respond, we react. There's a difference between these two things. React is we react what we did the last time someone told us something that we didn't like. So the last time someone told me something I didn't like, I reacted by saying, no way. No way. No, you're wrong because X, Y, and Z. But interestingly, we can choose the response. There's a moment in time between something happens, let's call it stimulus, an event happens, and then there's a gap. And normally we react in that gap. But that gap, we can actually choose the response. It's the gap between ultimate response from the starting point. I love this quote from Frankel. It's a really good quote. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. What a quote. That's not the end of the keynote, I'm just getting a drink. So we actually have this choice, right? So the choice is, when the winds of change are blowing, you can either build a wall, or you can build a windmill. You either use the change as an enemy, like the internet, or you use the change as a fueling mechanism. And all the disruption that happens from the exponential growth, all the disruption that happens actually spreads across the entire value chain. So if I say to you something about 3D printing sneakers, and you work in an IT company, there's a B2B company that sells software into industry, you might think it's not linked. But interestingly, any disruption actually links and spreads across the rest of all industry verticals. Because maybe, in fact, the time where the disruption hits this part of the value chain is affecting a group of retailers that use a software as a service solution that you're a vendor for. Therefore, the disruption that happens at this part of the value chain also affects your part of the value chain eventually. One of the biggest crimes against business that I've ever seen is our feeling that whatever we're seeing isn't relevant to us. We tend to build a shelter, and I am the most guilty in this room probably of doing so. We tend to build a shelter. We build the wall. The last thing we do is build a windmill. But the people who innovate and become the multi-billionaires, funnily enough, build the windmills. It's a thing. How the initial disruption point actually eventually catches us up. And the stages of disruption, by the way, as we're talking at this point, are these. The first thing is there's obviously a fundamental change in the way things are produced or consumed or delivered, right? So that's like the way that disruption happens. The second point is that we actually perceive it as a really low threat. Do you remember the first time you saw a mobile phone? It's like, yeah, right. So I'm going to carry around a briefcase like that. This thing. This is what we do. My dad, still to this day, when he's on his mobile phone, stands over the old phone because he thinks that's the transmitter and receiver. He's not watching shit, it's being videoed. I didn't mean that, Dad. Love you. So the third one is that there's this growth by network effect. So so the first thing, fundamental change in production, delivery, consumption. Secondly, it's not a threat. Thirdly, the network of people who believe that this is useful grows. And then, boom, inflection point into mainstream. That's the DNA of disruption. The question is, when we look at things around us, which stage do we think we're at? By the time we look at something and it's stage 4, like the hotel industry looking at Airbnb, by the time they look at Airbnb and go, oh, wow, they're the 3rd largest hotel chain in the world, it's too late. That's when you know it's too late. When they have a $10 billion market valuation, that's kind of like maybe 3 years too late. But then, when was it going to be something that they could actually do anything about? Was it at the beginning? How could they have seen what these 2 guys in San Francisco were creating? How could they know that Airbnb was coming? Well, funnily enough, they could have, because Airbnb isn't new. Craigslist in the States was doing Airbnb for 10 years. So hotel chains knew that people were selling their own rooms, renting out their own rooms, a decade before Airbnb hurt them. So okay, so not 1. 2, did they see it as a low threat? Hell yeah. There's some beautiful quotes from the chief executive of Marriott and chief executive of other hotel chains saying, we're monitoring Airbnb and we think that in about 10 to 15 years' time, we may consider buying them. Like, really? Well, now they're twice the size of you. So good luck with that purchase. Is it the 3rd bit? Is it when the groundswell happens? How could we tell if the public are actually believing something? Well, the good news is there's so much information around us, there's so much big data that we can tell. You can get a fire hose out of the back of Twitter, download all the tweets that have happened in the last day, and cross-analyse them to people who are talking about a particular brand. Of course you can do it. You can do it. But we don't. Because it's a low threat. It's an interesting world we live in. The next industries, just so you know, that are going to go through what I went through are these. Oh, won't you? There you go. Is it? Okay, you got it? When I show this, the key point is this. You're looking at this right now, and even without you realising, you're thinking, well, actually, you know what, John? From where I'm sitting over here, we actually work in an IT company, and we don't deal with any of those 6, so everything's good. Maybe so. However, it's possible that some of your customers do work in these industries. It maybe is the case that your children experience parts of these services. It may be the case that where you put your money in a bank may appear here. And what happened in the music industry is minute 1 of hour 1 of day 1 of what disruption looks like for these 6. The question is whether or not we think there's no threat. So, one of the poisons, there's this business poison that goes through business, many business poisons. There's 25, 26 business poisons. I record them in my little book. Actually, it's a screen, obviously. But I record business poisons when I hear business poisons, when people are speaking, and I go, oh, that's a business poison, that's going to infect you. And some of my favourite business poisons, and yes, of course I have a book called Business Poison available on Amazon.com for £6.99 and other currencies. But, what? I didn't say that. The poisons, some of them are that we know enough, right? So you know what, there's nothing that you can tell me because I know more than you. Really common, dead common. Secondly, we're fast enough. So even if you tell me something that's going to happen to my business, or a business that's affecting my business, or a business that I may actually be trading in without realising it, bearing in mind that disruption spreads, we're fast enough to act anyway. Or alternatively, we're good enough. So whatever happens, we're actually going to be better than whatever the disruption is, said to the hotel chains, and Kodak, and the music industry, and Best Buy, and Jessams, and HMV. And also we say we're rich enough. What will happen is when we see something that's going to happen, we're going to buy it. Just buy it. Really? That sounds very tactical. What's the strategic direction? We're rich enough. So we can buy it. That's what we can do. Have you seen the amount of money in our bank? Or we say we're innovative enough. We can actually out-innovate any of these small startups with supercomputers, working in a crowdsourced way with 13,000 developers around the world, 24/7, in agile technologies. We're actually innovative enough against them. Oh yes, we are. Why is that, I say? They say, because have you seen the last 40 years of our business growth? All right, I'm sorry, I asked you why you think you're actually going to be innovative enough. Yes, John, have you seen the last 40 years of our stock price growth? It's going in our business boys book. And then, we have plenty of time. We have plenty of time. It's so far out. Holographic people, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, robotics, stealing jobs, years out. Years out, if it weren't for the fact that everything I've said, and everything I will say, every syllable, my friends, actually exists. But no, it's years out. Low perceived threat rating. And the worst poison is this one. So if you catch yourself over the next 43 minutes seeing anything that you think isn't relevant, bearing in mind I've never done the same keynote twice in my life. This is for you. I've got the attendee list, I've studied all of your companies, and Christian will actually tell you that this is also true. I know who you are, and I've constructed what I think are the biggest signposts that you can choose to act upon as a windmill or build a wall against. For you. For the IT technology industry of Norway and wider territories. This is for you, not for anyone else. It's just for you. And if you think that any of it's not relevant, then you have to choose whether or not you think that either I think that something is too futuristic and not relevant enough or whatever, or whether you do. So catch yourself. You can either see these as risks, or you can see these as opportunities. The next 12 slides, 24 slides, are going to contain possibly several multi-billion-dollar opportunities that aren't tapped yet. I'm being taken off the stage already. Are we doing another dance? You're going to warn me about the song? Oh yeah, I might be up on stage later apparently. Anyway, so, risks to opportunities. You know what? We, the music industry, should have invented iTunes. We should have invented Spotify. Why? Why? Is EMI Records now a WordPress blog? And iTunes has 93 million credit card customers. Why? Why didn't Hilton launch this? Why? Why didn't Marriott? Doubletree? Starwood? Why not? Over the last 25 years of business, after making some of the most globally spectacular mistakes for any businessman to make, I've observed that the most cutting-edge innovations that steal the market aren't done by the companies that should have done them. That had the right people, the right knowledge, the right technology, the right innovative strategies, that for some reason they don't do the innovation bit. And even if they are innovating, they're linear, not exponential. It's weird. So, when we see, here's the risks, opportunities. When you see something like Amazon Echo launch, you might think that this is a pretty cheap Bluetooth speaker that works a bit like Siri, so you can speak to this device, add this to my shopping list, and then your Echo adds it to the shopping list. What's the weather like today? Echo says, open the bloody window. But you can think, I don't know where that comes from. You can think that you're looking at a piece of technology that is absolutely unrelated to you. Actually, the only link to you is that you might use EC2 computing or AWS services in some way. You may help merchants on the Amazon web storefronts. You may use Amazon to buy your Christmas presents. But the reality is that these are signposts for a world of connected devices that I'm sure we've all got our heads around, that can discover things for us, decide for us, transact for us, and communicate with us and without us. I'm not saying that this is good. I'm a humanist and a nowist rather than a futurist. I don't think that losing serendipity is a good thing. I don't think we should be chasing down the end of human era. I think that's really bad. But what this means is that by this time next year, when there's 20 plus billion connected devices to each other, we're living in a world where these things we look at the same as we did with a mobile phone and a briefcase. That's what you're looking at now. I want you to imagine what this looks like in 15 years' time, when the average size of a computer chip is the size of a blood cell, and it's 1 billion times more capable than today. Not one syllable I have said is futurism. This is Moore's law, exponential growth. When everything that we're connected to can also transact and communicate. At the moment, in a B2B software company, we're selling our services into a company that uses the services to deliver their products or service or operations. Who is going to be developing the software for these things? If you say Amazon now, you're sacrificing the market. You're also thinking that everything to do with smart devices is just going to be Amazon. Of course it's not. So when this chair can communicate with a table, or where my bottle can communicate with a waiter, who's writing that software? Have you got plenty of time, John? Plenty of time. Plenty of time. And also, quite frankly, we're rich enough. So as soon as we see it, we're going to buy it, because we can. When we see that how people discover information is fundamentally changing, we still think that people's customer journeys start on Google search. Right? That's what we think. So online customer journeys, maybe search, maybe personal recommendation, social mentions, whatever ticks your boxes. We tend to say whatever the company says that we should say. So whatever the company's agenda is, that's what we think happens in terms of discovery now. The reality of discovery is that because this mass media landscape is so vast of information and so instant, the reality of discovery is that we haven't even tapped into how people really decide yet. We're minute 1 of hour 1 of that game 2. So, when you see Wolf of Wall Street, anyone here seen Wolf of Wall Street? So, as you all know, there's a great scene, well, arguably a great scene, which involves the character, Jordan Belfort, actually played by Leonardo DiCaprio, who has consumed, for one reason or another, 4 pills called Quaaludes. Now, these pills are drugs, I have to say, children. This is the way that it ends, and it does something to his head. To such an extent, he's actually unable to get into his Lamborghini in a fantastic scene, which I think is the best advert for not taking drugs I've ever seen. But in terms of discovery, the very next day after this film was released, the highest search term on Google was this. So now it would seem that the influence, not just of celebrity endorsements, but celebrities' unendorsements, the influence of people and what they do is such that it's actually driving mass behaviour. And the question to you on this slide is, how much are you looking at the content that people consume that might be affecting their thoughts and feelings and actions? See, John, we create this IT software thing, and we sell it into a company. Or we're a consultant, and we advise businesses on how to move into the cloud. So what you're showing me here is totally irrelevant. So you think it's totally irrelevant. Bearing in mind that this device means you don't even need to use a search engine. So we're sitting at home with a device that we can speak to that answers things for us. We watch a film, we speak to the device, and no one's gone to a search engine. No one has used a shopping cart. We tell the device what we want, and if Quaaludes were available online, which they're not, and I've tried, if they were available online, if you say add tomatoes to my shopping cart, and please deliver them in 2 days' time on my Prime account. No one has touched any computer screen. Do you think that could have an effect on your business? And what are the opportunities for what you do? Using this type of algorithmic technology, how could you do this for wider businesses? It's full of opportunity. When we look at connection, everyone in Norway who's online, out of the 5 million people here, the online contingent, are connected to around 120 people on average each. 120. Which means that in Norway, the first tier reach of someone is 120 people. The second tier reach is 120 times 120, which is 14,400. The third tier reach is 14,400 times 120, which is 1.728 million. That's the third tier reach of everyone in Norway. Of each person. What's your media reach? People are the media. There is no such thing as social media. It's an invented term. People are the media. So when Urban Outfitters, the youth clothing brand, created this sweatshirt called Kent State University Retro, which harks back to that fun day in 1970 where 4 school kids were killed and 9 were brutally injured in the anti-Vietnam War protest. It harks back to those wonderful times where a gunman came in and wiped out the playground. And they show some retro blood stains on the sweatshirt. And it's really cool, right? It's nice. It gives you a nice warm feeling inside. You feeling Christmassy now? When they do this, and people as a media go crazy, you may think this is a bad PR activity. No, what it is a 13% stock price drop and a fifth of the value of the company wiped in Wall Street. With even in the last quote, the management saying that they don't believe that it's going to return in anywhere near the short or medium term. And the analysts say, sell all of your Urban Outfitters stock from one sweatshirt. Thanks, bro. He doesn't know that I've got one over here, does he? Pay attention. So when Walmart create their Halloween costume line called Fat Girls Costumes, it's just a slip-up. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know. They didn't think it through enough. It lost 27% of their profits for that quarter. This one usage of words. What this means, chaps and chapettes, is we might not think that we're dealing with people because we deal with businesses, but businesses have people inside them. And those people inside them still are connected to an average of 120 people each. You are the brand inside of work, you are the brand outside of work. You should now, my advice is, to live as if you're on CCTV always. Not too warm and fuzzy. I'll lighten that. Let me do this. A cynic would argue that you should maybe think more carefully about your privacy. The reality is that everything that we say and do is translatable to up to millions of people at any one time. If you're a B2B company, you are actually a B2C company, but the C happens to be inside of B. Actually, you're a C2C company, but you've got B on top. We're people dealing with people. People are connected with weapons of mass communication, microjournalism devices, including that pen. Retail. Anyone here work with any retailers? Retail is being fundamentally disrupted. Oh, those good old days. The good old days of music copyright. I love those days. There was no way that Grieg would have ever been able to be shown on some kind of merchandise without us getting some money for it. Or my Norwegian counterparts. No way. But now on Etsy, with 184 million users a year, there's 45,000 unofficial branded products uploaded every day. If you own the copyright for something on Etsy, who are you going to sue first? Out of 40,000. It's like standing in the Pacific Ocean with your hand out trying to stop the waves. It's like trying to sue the internet. Who would do that? Investment. If we look at investment, investment is being totally and utterly fundamentally disrupted. Right now, if you want to actually invest in, if you want investment into something, the best way of getting investment is to create something that people care about and ask them. Hold on, John. Create something people care about. I think that's our marketing team. Because this investment reality is bigger than any VC angel system you can have. In terms of the amount of money that flies through things like Kickstarter, or over here you've got the new Jellyway. This is minute one of hour one. This is the very tip of an iceberg of what it means to in the entire investment community, where people can put 10 kronas here, 10 euros here, 15 euros here, and things get funded far quicker, provided people care about it. And I really care about the air umbrella, which is a tube and no material, and it actually blows air against the raindrops. I've backed this, as have another 800 plus people, to $103,000 worth of backing. They only need 10,000. It's an amazing world of investment. Currency is being fundamentally disrupted. The fastest growing currencies are peer-to-peer currencies. Oh no, John, not in Norway. Not in Norway, because the way that we've got it is the banks are actually going to regulate against that, so we're okay. If it were the case, as it was 10 years ago, that we only traded within the country that we trade within, everything is globalised now. We're dealing with companies that have people from other countries inside. We have customers who are from all around the world, and we're dealing in the ether. That means that you can buy products and services from your company outside Norway, even if you say it's only available in Norway. Because the reality is that things like this mean that anything can be available to anyone anywhere. And it doesn't actually need to come from you. It doesn't even need to be official. In fact, the reality is there's more unofficial brands than there are brands. There's also more virtual farmers than there are real farmers, which is weird. And to that point, I knew I had a purpose in saying that, experience is being fundamentally disrupted. So when we're actually looking at the second highest grossing hotel chain in Japan, which is called Love Plus, which is actually a game on a phone, but is actually a hotel, that's actually a game, it's actually a hotel, it's actually a game, you go there with your phone, playing a Love Plus game, and your friend can take a picture using your phone that shows your virtual girlfriend standing next to you. Second highest, most popular hotel resort in Japan. It is 16 months overbooked. There are 1,000 rooms. Inside which, on the ceiling of the rooms, you've got digital screens so you can lie down next to your virtual girlfriend and watch her performing various tasks. You're a sick man. You're a sick man. You're a sick man. I mean, like sleeping and eating and shit. So, experience is fundamentally disruptive. Not really. And by the way, it's interesting because they did the TV company out there invited a load of the people who use Love Plus onto telly, 3 guys and 2 girls. And they said to the guys, so, have you, would you prefer to have a virtual girlfriend rather than a physical girlfriend? All 3 said yes, of course, but if you look at them, you can see why. But they did a countrywide, that's me, they did a kind of oil painting, they did a countrywide survey, and 38% of men in Japan, right now, between the ages of 18 and 24, are not intending to ever have a physical girlfriend. It has lowered the birth rate by 2% in the last 2 years. Interestingly, if you ask the amount of women in Japan if they ever want a physical boyfriend, 87% said no. I don't know what that means. I'm sure these stats are made up. Don't worry about it, chaps. But yeah, it's been a year since my divorce, and I'm still bitter. No, I'm kidding. So, the experience is being fundamentally disrupted. So what this means, because there are 80 times as many virtual farmers as there are real farmers, and because there are hotel chains that are actually now specialising in virtual reality, the question to you is, when do you think is the right time to start creating products and services for virtual people? Bearing in mind they're more virtual people than real people, I'm just thinking out loud. Which furniture brands created the virtual furniture in the hotel rooms? The answer? Love Plus, the game developers. Why? Because all the furniture companies thought they were crazy. Which burger chain sells the most virtual burgers online? Gaia. Gaia is a virtual store that sells 1 million burgers an hour for €1. Real money. And it's a virtual burger. It's a graphic. I spoke to James Rennie at MacDonald's. He laughed so much I could still hear him laughing when I was out in the car park, calling up the chief executive guy and saying, "You're safe." It's like walking around a room full of €50 notes and deciding not to pick it up. Think out there. Production is being fundamentally disrupted. The way things are made. Sorry, John, everything's in the cloud. Not one thing is made in our company. Well, the chair you sit on is, and the desk you sit on is, and the contents of your office is, and also the things that your client is making. So far I've listed 5 really tangible things, 4 or 5 tangible things that are then disrupted. And you know the retailer client that you have, of which 90% of their catalogue could actually be printed out? That's an issue when they don't need their logistics and manufacturing anymore. And you go, no, it's okay, John, I've seen the 3D printers. They print out rubbish pieces of plastic. It's okay, we're good. But 50% of the gold medal athletes in the Olympic Games were wearing 3D printed sneakers. So the 3D printing machine you've seen evidently isn't the 3D printing machine that Mark Parker, the chief executive of Nike, has seen. He's obviously seen a different one than you. And then, of course, there's the 3D printed pasta that you can eat on demand at Google's office. I decided to have a sunflower. This is what it came out like. I don't quite know how I feel about that, but nonetheless. You also have the skull replacement transplants that's happening in South Korea using 3D printed skulls. And then you have the 4D printed kinetic architecture, which is actually being able to print things that change shape. So print out, if you take this whole story from far left to far right, you're looking at shoes that you can buy that grow with you. Clothes that can expand and contract, chairs that can become more comfortable organically, buildings that can move in the wind, cars that can change shape on demand. And if you think that it's too far out there, nothing that I've shown you is futuristic. The question is, how are you going to use this as an opportunity? What could you imagine that could do for your business? Where is the white space of opportunity you're staring at right now? Server towers that can change shape. Oh no, that's what the cloud is. Okay. Think. But John, 3D printing machines are €20,000 now. And that's the first mobile phone. The first mobile phone was about the equivalent price. Now they're free, right? So when every single person that you work with and work for and sell to and buy from can produce anything that is physically existing, what happens to every single person who works in a factory? Everyone who works in manufacturing, everyone who works in logistics, everyone who works in retail, the post service. But John, it's not going to have that kind of take-up. Why? Because the last 5 years has shown it hasn't going to have that take-up. Sorry, I asked you why. Not a history lesson. Why won't it have a take-up? Well, John, I've been in business for 35 years, mate. And to be honest, things like this, they come, they go. You know, like mobile phones, digital cameras and phones. They just disappear. It's like, these like tablet things. It's just like, never going to catch on. iPod used to stand for, in my world, as idiots price our devices. We used to laugh so much, like, no one's going to buy that, Steve. So you're going to make an incompatible player, force everyone to basically change their music collection, and then buy something for £500 that doesn't work with anything other than your stuff. Yes. Well, you're crazy, said we. And then if we look at all of this together, you're seeing a situation, really, if you add it all up, where you have a guy who's sitting on his own in a jacuzzi. The jacuzzi, however, has a smart chip inside it and a chemical meter that can automatically order the chemicals that are required when it hits a certain level. Working around on the top. Chemical meter, automatically orders the chemicals, top right. Bottom left, the Amazon Prime Air drone brings the chemicals over to the jacuzzi, prints out the compounds in a 3D printer that's part of the drone, and logs itself into the jacuzzi, and then bingo, you suddenly get 2 new girlfriends. I'm joking. But the reality is, I just realised I'm in church, sorry. I swore, never. It's over. It's been 24 years. So this is all possible. It's just that no one in the jacuzzi industry thinks that this is an opportunity. No one in the chemical industry thinks it's an opportunity. Amazon really do think it's an opportunity. And the 3D printing companies are begging people to take their kit. That's what we've got here. Mass ignorance, no one cares, one company does, and a 3D printing market that will give away stuff for you to try. If you replace the term jacuzzi, use anything you like, what are the opportunities for what you do? Who's creating algorithms? Who's creating the software? Do we allow one company to take all of it? And then specifically for where we are now, with what is happening in energy, it's really interesting. You can also print out solar panels on demand. You're going for a long hike, you've got 20% battery left on your phone, you print out a solar panel that's the size of your phone. You go hiking, your battery's charged. What are we doing in this part? It all exists, this isn't futuristic. Not one syllable is futuristic. Information is being fundamentally disrupted. So when we actually start thinking about what zoomable contact lenses mean, that exist, I've tried them in South Korea, up at John, we're in Norway. So, yes, good. So tried them in South Korea, these zoomable contact lenses, which is nothing in comparison to digital smart medicine. Digital medicine that you can actually ingest into your bloodstream, and you can actually, your bloodstream will tell you how healthy you are. I want you to think about what that happens to doctors then, when you diagnose yourself. Literally, you. What happens to marketeers and advertisers when you're looking at a cereal box or a chair, and you sit down on the chair, and your back tells you whether it's comfortable. Tell me where marketing plays a role. You think that the Nike Fuel Band and wearable technology is where it's at? God, it's so tedious. No. Where it's at is in-eye nanobots that can actually run your prescription to find out what type of glasses you need. What happens to opticians then? Nothing that I've shown you is futuristic. And the fact that it's not widely distributed yet, for me, signs to be a massive opportunity. What are we going to do? What are we going to do about this reality? How can we use these technologies to gain such commercial advantage that the only thing we need to think about is whether we mind other people laughing at us? Until the inflection point. And then begging us for a job. This is for you. Whilst disruption can spread. And by the way, I will be here until the very last moment tonight. And if you bring me over either a beer or a white wine or a red wine or any other alcoholic drink, I will bore you about this stuff forever. It's a warning. This is a surefire way of me standing on my own in the corner for the whole night going, no one cares. Disruption spreads. I'm only saying that because I haven't got any cash to buy any. That's the only point. No, I'm kidding. I found some cash. Disruption spreads. I believe opportunity spreads. I think we can either see it as a risk, or we can see it as an opportunity. We either build a wall, or we build a windmill. We either react, or we respond. We choose. It's the gap between stimulus and response. Lies our growth and our freedom. So right now, what you must be thinking is, how then do I build this windmill? I get it. I'm enthused. I really want to do something with some of these new ways of thinking. You've expanded our thinking, now what? I have 3 pieces of advice to close with. 3. Really simple. Really, really simple. The first piece of advice is this. I have observed, I've worked with over 200 companies, most of which in the Fortune 500, over these couple of decades, that the companies that absolutely max the opportunities out have done these 3 things. And the first is they've elevated the view of what business they're in to a greater level. They view the business they're in a different way than other people. Let me go through this. So, Harley-Davidson aren't in the business of motorcycles, they're in the business of freedom for middle-aged men. Which is why, when they launch a skateboard brand, and they launch a hotel chain, and a whiskey brand, all of them go up to the top 5 brands in their category. Why? How can a motorcycle company do that? Because they're not making motorcycles, mate, they're making freedom. Wonderbra. You think they make lingerie. Wonderbra think they make self-confidence. They could do anything in self-confidence and win. When Kodak was going down, Fuji was going up. Why? They're both making cameras. Kodak had a load of digital camera patents. Why did Fuji go up and Kodak go down? Shall I tell you why? Because Fuji didn't think they were making cameras. They saw the smartphone stuff coming, the Samsung V200 in 2001, the first ever camera phone on mass market release. There was actually something called J-phone in Seoul, South Korea a year before, but no, it didn't sell outside of Korea. So, the Samsung V200 phone. I walked that phone in to Kodak and to Fuji. Kodak laughed. Fuji went, oh. And how many of these are going to be shipped in the next 2 years, do you think? I said, well, I can't predict the future, all I can predict is that change happens today, so they said, John, okay, don't do the keynote. So that's what do you think? I said, maybe as many as 350 million units in the next 3 years. I was out, obviously, I was out by 100 million. But you know what? 250 million phones actually has an impact. So what Fuji did was they decided that we're not in the business of cameras, we're in the business of how light affects any membrane. Photography, which is writing with light, is one membrane, but I don't know, how can we find another membrane that could be affected? Car tyres? Yes. Roofs of houses? Yes. Skin? Yes. So Fuji launched, in 2007, what became the world's largest selling, and still is the world's largest selling, anti-wrinkle skincare cream called Astalift, which is now the same size as the whole of Kodak before it went bankrupt. Elevation, my friends. What business do you think you're in? Really? Because the Iceman in 1903 was one of the most wanted people to come around to our houses. He used to come around with a block of ice. This isn't point 2, by the way, I'm labouring point 1 on. I've got 13 minutes to kill. Labouring. So, Iceman come around and he put food into the blocks of ice. They said, and it's in Harper's Magazine, that Iceman interview, when faced with the question, what are you going to do about refrigerators? The Iceman said, the representative of the Iceman community said, hardly anyone has one, because hardly anyone can afford electricity. And even if they could afford electricity, they couldn't afford the refrigerator. So we're okay. Does that ring any bells? The Iceman should have invented the refrigerator, right? We, as the music industry, should have invented iTunes and Spotify, right? If you elevated what you do upward, what do you think you would have a divine right to create? Opportunity. Next point is this. I have observed that those that are the least likely to be disrupted, ironically, have planned their own disruption. They have an entire unit of people who spend no time doing anything other than planning how to disrupt their own company. They create working groups as to what would kill us. How could we go out of business? If the tobacco companies had really thought about that 11 years ago, they would have created the electronic cigarette, right? It's not a stretch. One has got paper and tobacco and nicotine and carbon monoxide and strychnine and lots of other really good things. The other is electric with nicotine and water and who else knows what just yet. Why didn't the tobacco companies create? No, actually, this dude created the electronic cigarette. Honlick, 2003, and he patented everything. Everything. And you know when you do a patent, right? The lawyers put it out, and then everyone else can challenge it. The tobacco companies, what do you think they said, ladies and gentlemen? That's correct, yes. So, he got all of the patents granted. And to this day, all of the tobacco companies pay between $70 and $100 million a year to just play on the licenses. And he, quite rightly, is having a fag. Why didn't they do that? What have I shown you that in 3 years' time you'll go, what have I shown you that is that? Do you think? The third and final point in closing is this. I'm not a motivational speaker. But Lord have mercy. Of all of the times to act, it's kind of now. Because I don't know where we are on this line. I don't know where the yellow is. I'm not a futurist. So I don't know when it's going to inflect into the mainstream. I can't tell. All I can tell is I'm surrounded by people who don't see any threat. Which to me is the second part of our DNA of disruption. That's a worry. When people go, I'm not worried about that, I'm like, oh, you're not worried about it? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. It's an interesting situation. The time to act is now. Because those with the will to succeed probably will. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan MacDonald. He said he might have joined a big songwriter, but I think a few of you are going to have to treat him to a drink first. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Can I share something with you? Because we're in totally different businesses. What I've been doing for 30 years. My father told me something, and I don't know where this comes from. I'm just curious to see if you've heard this saying. And for me, it changes everything. And the things you've been talking about is how far and how fast dare you go. And the saying my dad gave to me was, how big would you dream if you knew you couldn't fail?
It's nice. That's on my next keynote presentation. Thanks.
There you go. Jonathan MacDonald. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I know there's a lot of information to take in there, and I was mesmerised whilst listening. Does anybody have any questions? If you dare think about it and dare challenge, perhaps, support.
The most awkward questions I prefer. The most awkward one I had last week actually was, what's your thinking of your worst one? Is this lady from North Korea stood up. And she said, Jonathan, bearing in mind the socio-political conflict that we have in North Korea and the need to harmonise with the rest of the world, how do you feel we would best govern such a situation, which is almost constantly in potential warfare?
You know he had a good answer, don't you?
Well, from those consultants in the room, you will know the answer to that. The consultant's answer is, this particular question is so nuanced that it would be wrong of me to say one thing or another, because what we have in front of us is a spectrum of opportunities. And ultimately it's up for the North Koreans to decide what they believe is morally right for their cause.
There's a challenge. Has anybody got a question that might be as challenging? Or, you know, of course got an answer. Somebody somewhere.
Come on, ask me a really awkward question, please. Or just my phone number, it's on there. No, it's not.
When are yourself being virtualized?
Yes, that's the question. When am I myself being virtualized? For business, let's elevate this. One, I'm not in the game of speaking. I'm a catalyst. That's all I am. It doesn't need to be through speaking. I catalyse people's thinking. That's what I do. Elevation. Two, planning. The thing that would disrupt me is losing my voice, losing my ability to write, and losing my ability to think. So I invest heavily into Pacific Rim stocks, into holographics and AI. And three, I've already started out 4 years ago when I realised that I probably at some stage will be out of business for one reason or another. Good question. Next up. Come on, because in 3 hours' time I'm not going to be able to speak this well. Too much apple juice.
Hi.
Hey!
What do you think is going to happen to all the people, the employees, when everything gets digitalized?
That's another good question. I believe that we should only build the future we want, and we tend to be building a future that works best for the stock price or our investors. Sadly, there's a lot of investment into things that will eventually mean that people aren't needed as much. And I think that we have an opportunity now to try and change that mix, ethically. But I'm afraid that any roles that people do that can be automated probably will be. And I think we're staring down the barrel of somewhat of a philosophical revolution, where we end up in a situation where there are maybe billions more people than there are jobs, with computers that look at humans and say, well, why would we employ you? Because you get tired. And if this was a different keynote, and not such a happy, jovial location, I would say that we need to start making some amends right now, ethically, in terms of technology. But we're not. Because either there's a low perceived threat rating, or it's not relevant to us. Next question. Hey, young man down at the front. You're going to run down, Chris? You're going to run down with the mic? No? Okay, I'll repeat your question, so.
Do we have any speeches for politicians? What's the reaction?
Yes, and guess. No. Do I ever do speeches for politicians? I had a modest hand in changing a law, actually, through speaking, in the UK. And so sometimes it's worked. I mean, sometime it worked. I don't seem to be able to say a political agenda convincingly. So I tend to not be invited to speak to people who say, okay, what you're going to say is this, okay, now go. Which is exactly what I did to the lawyers and the consultants in the music industry. When people say that to me, I make sure that I do the opposite. So politicians don't really hire me. But I believe that I could be of benefit to politicians if they were to have a wider, broad mindset of how to ethically work with societies. The word citizen, the word city, cities are actually to enable people to achieve their greatest being. Somewhere down the line, we've started to run things that are not linked to the rights of citizens. But geez, can you imagine me saying that to a political party? We're going. Plus, they don't have very big budgets. I'm kidding, of course. What an arsehole. Can you imagine saying that? If you pay me enough, I'll speak. No. Hey. The question is, of all the businesses that have actually followed the elevation planning and urgency mix, what would be the best in class and how do they achieve that process? Well, sad to say, one of the best in class is Amazon. The work that I've done with Jeff over the last 7 years has been, from speaking with the Amazon guys and also Brian, who was the MD of UK, has been amazing because of all the things that I've done, the room of Amazon people are writing down notes, they're sketching, they've got whiteboards. I'd be like 12, 13 slides in and they're actually sketching out models. And Werner Vogel's a good friend of mine, the CTO, will be coding while I'm talking about what I'm saying. Why aren't you? So that is what I was saying. Secondly, I think one of the companies that I've really enjoyed working with over the years, and I know they're seen as the bad devil sometimes, is Google. I'm one of those zeitgeist thinkers. They bring me in to tell them what might be next, which is ironic because I never actually speak about the future, but still they hire me. And Google X is actually the team that I admire the most inside Google. And Google X, they're trying to solve the world's hardest problems to solve by using the most cutting-edge technology in the most disruptive way. That's their business model. And they're perpetually in beta. Everything is fail, fail, fail. So they actually have a metric score of how many times they can fail with ideas. Forget the success. Fail, learn, improve. Fail, learn, improve. Fail, learn, improve. John Turner, the Chief Innovation Officer from Procter & Gamble, spends €4 billion a year on failing so they can come up with new innovations. Which is why they're the biggest branding company in the world. Fail, learn, improve. Invest, invest, invest. Fail, learn, improve. These guys are on fire, but they're not untouchable. It's just that no one seems to feel that they're worthy of competing. Ironically, smaller companies probably have a bigger chance of competing against those bigger companies from the reasons I've just mentioned. It's the innovator's dilemma. What goes up stays up. They get to a big enough stage. Amazon are already getting to a stage where it's so slow in comparison to 12 years ago. Things get slowed down, and when the slowness happens, that's when the disruption opportunity happens, because the inflection point happens quicker. So you probably have a greater chance of being an Amazon in 7 years than Amazon do. If you want to. We're done. We're 14 seconds over, Christian.
Yeah, but if there are anyone more...
You don't have to stand up, but thank you. No, stand up!
Too late now. I have 5 children.
That's why I can't operate with women now.
Takes experience.
Thank you. Oh, I've got plenty of that. I've even got some grey hairs here. I've got grey hairs here.
Maybe the wrong kind of experience then.
Yeah.
Well, to the question, I have 5 children and they're all going to be computer scientists like their mother. However, they don't see eye to eye with me on that. Do you have any advice for them?
It depends on what. I have 2 kids too. I have a 12 and a 14-year-old, and they view computers and science and mobile and technology totally different than I do. They don't see the interface. They'll pick one up, use another one, put that down, do this, touch that. If it doesn't open, they'll do that. I say, do you prefer Android or iOS? They're like, what? So my view, anyway, with my kids, is that I don't actually use the term computer, science, technology. I look at it in terms of objective. So my son, for instance, really likes drawing. So he might become a virtual reality experience designer. But I don't say, hey, you could be a virtual reality experience designer. I say, you know what, you could make stories inside games. So I like that. Stories inside games, I like that. He doesn't know that means that he needs to actually understand gameplay mechanics, the technical part of that, multi-reality experience levels. But if I told him any of that, he'd say no. So you could try, perhaps, I do anyway, try changing all of the words and talking about what it actually would achieve. Because if, for instance, your daughter wants to become a fashion designer, the reality is she will be a computer scientist. If she wants to become a chef, the reality is she will be a computer scientist. The only 2 things that I teach my children at home, in order, are advanced code, from C++ to Python, and Drupal and everything else like that. And the second one is morals and ethics. That's the only 2 things you need nowadays. And an iPad. Yes, sir.
Right. Based on all you told us tonight, which of the current sciences will you consider will be most disrupted in the next 2 to 3 years?
Sciences.
Sciences.
Well, the first one is going to be.
Because based on what you told us, some sciences must will have to be disrupted.
Correct. Biology first, 100% biology, because I studied biology at college before I dropped out to go on the road with my band. But biology, the learning of biology in terms of schooling is based largely on traditional understanding of what biology is and how a cell is structured and so forth. But the research that's happening in biology is happening less and less by scientists who can't get funded to do the research. So it's happening by hackers who don't need the funding from governments, and they won't provide the results to the governments. So the disruption in biology is from not only an education standpoint, an understanding standpoint, but also an innovation standpoint and a research standpoint. Huge. The one that's the least likely to be disrupted in the next 5 years is physics. Thankfully. I thank you very much. I'll see you at the bar. Namaste.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan MacDonald.